Oklahoma's economic development strategy. Cheap, unhealthy, and undereducated. Oklahoma sold itself as cheap. Boeing needed it to be smart. Governor Kevin Stitt says Oklahoma should be run more like a business. Fair enough. One of the first rules of running a successful business is knowing what your customers actually want. Oklahoma's customers, the employers considering whether to invest, expand, and hire here, have not been difficult to understand. Boeing has said it needs experienced engineers. Business organizations have warned that workforce shortages limit economic growth. Oklahoma's own business leaders have identified education, healthcare, and workforce preparation as essential to the state's future. Yet Oklahoma's political leadership has spent years acting as though the answer to every economic problem is another tax cut, another corporate subsidy, or another financial incentive handed to a well-connected business. The customers asked for a healthy, educated workforce. Oklahoma offered them a coupon. And when businesses still struggled to find qualified employees, state leaders responded as though the problem must be that the coupon was not generous enough. A financial incentive can affect where a company locates. It cannot replace the educated workforce necessary for that company to expand. Boeing has received substantial economic development incentives in Oklahoma. A report published in 2018 found that the company had received more than $90 million through state incentive programs over the preceding decades. Boeing said those incentives played a meaningful role in its decisions to expand and relocate jobs. That is important to acknowledge. But receiving an incentive is not the same thing as receiving the workforce necessary to keep growing. In 2018, Boeing recruiting officer Jason Thomas explained that the company was looking for experienced engineers. He said there was just not a lot of them in Oklahoma. The warning was clear. Boeing needed trained, experienced people, not simply another state incentive. The same discussion included an Air Force official's warning that the pipeline of engineers was woefully insufficient. Boeing and the wider aerospace sector needed people who could design, analyze, troubleshoot, and develop sophisticated technology. Oklahoma kept offering financial incentives while failing to build enough of the workforce those incentives were supposed to attract and support. A payroll rebate cannot pass calculus. A tax credit cannot graduate from engineering school. And a ribbon-cutting ceremony cannot design an aircraft. The problem was not that Oklahoma lacked information about what aerospace companies needed. The problem was that state leaders did not adequately respond to it. A 2025 evaluation found that employers continued to face a shortage of aerospace engineers. Engineering-related degrees awarded by Oklahoma public institutions fell from 2,814 in 2018 to 2,140 in 2024. That is a decline of 674 degrees. The decline was approximately 24%. While employers were warning that Oklahoma did not have enough engineers, the state's public higher education system was producing substantially fewer graduates in the relevant fields. The state evaluation did identify positive results from certain aerospace incentives and recommended retaining the program with modifications. The issue is not that every incentive produced no employment. The issue is that Oklahoma cannot sustain a high-skilled economic development strategy while its homegrown technical pipeline is shrinking. The same state evaluation found another problem that rarely appears in Oklahoma's economic development sales pitch. In 2024, aerospace engineers in Oklahoma earned an average of approximately $109,920. Aerospace engineers in neighboring states earned approximately $136,110. That is roughly $26,190 more per year than Oklahoma's average. Nationally, average aerospace engineer pay was approximately $134,830. The report acknowledged that Oklahoma's lower cost of living explains part of the difference, but not all of it. It also warned that the salary gap can undermine efforts to recruit qualified workers. These figures describe aerospace engineer wages across Oklahoma, not Boeing's internal salary schedule. If Oklahoma is paying companies to bring highly skilled jobs here, why are those jobs paying substantially less than comparable positions in nearby states? One possible answer is hiding in the governor's sales pitch. When Oklahoma markets itself as a low-cost place to do business, companies may interpret that as an opportunity to pay lower wages. Lower labor costs may be attractive to employers. They are considerably less attractive to the engineer being asked to move here, especially when that engineer also has to consider public schools, access to health care, child care, and whether the state is investing in the future of the community. Oklahoma's business organizations have not been subtle. The 2026 Oklahoma Business Leaders Poll surveyed 401 business owners and executives across the state about their biggest economic concerns. 74% identified workforce and education among the two most important issues affecting Oklahoma business growth. Nearly half said recruiting and retaining workers was their single greatest obstacle to profitability and expansion. 89% of Oklahoma business leaders supported prioritizing improved educational outcomes. That is not an anti-business position. It is what Oklahoma business owners themselves say they need to hire, compete, and expand. Nearly 60% of those business leaders said Oklahoma should invest surplus funds in public priorities rather than return the money through additional tax cuts. Oklahoma's business community is asking for the fundamentals of long-term economic growth. Mark Funk, president of the Oklahoma Business Roundtable, summarized the situation plainly. He said workforce, education, and healthcare will define the state's long-term success over the next 5 years. This was not a statement from an anti-business organization. It came from Oklahoma's own business leadership. The Greater Oklahoma City Chamber supports funding community health centers, protecting healthcare resources, expanding access to childcare, and maintaining a healthy workforce. Education, healthcare, and childcare are not separate from economic development. They are part of the infrastructure that makes economic development possible. Boeing told Oklahoma what it needed. Business leaders told Oklahoma what they needed. The chambers of commerce told Oklahoma what they needed. The governor kept talking about how cheap Oklahoma was. At some point, that stops looking like a misunderstanding. It starts looking like a business that refuses to listen to its customers. Oklahoma's workforce problem did not begin with one administration, and neither did the state's history of education cuts. But the long-term consequences are difficult to ignore. A state cannot weaken the institutions that develop talent and still expect a steady supply of highly trained workers. During the years following the Great Recession, Oklahoma reduced inflation-adjusted state school aid per student by approximately 28.2%. That figure refers specifically to state aid per student, not total combined education spending. Separate research found that Oklahoma was among 6 states where inflation-adjusted higher education funding per student declined by more than 30% between 2008 and 2018. Those historic cuts predated much of Governor Stitt's tenure, but the broader workforce investment problem remained. Engineering does not begin in an engineering classroom. It begins when children receive a strong foundation in reading and math. It continues when middle schools and high schools offer rigorous science, technology, and advanced mathematics. It requires qualified teachers, affordable colleges, technical programs, and clear pathways to actual employment. A state cannot spend years weakening those institutions and then act surprised when aerospace companies cannot find enough experienced engineers. That is not running government like a business. That is ignoring the supply chain. Workforce development does not begin when someone fills out a job application. It begins much earlier. Children who lack reliable nutrition face greater obstacles to learning. Health, nutrition, and family stability are practical ingredients in a functioning workforce pipeline. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reports that participation in school breakfast programs is associated with better attendance, fewer missed school days, and improved test scores. Feeding children is not separate from education. It supports the ability to learn. Health matters too. Federal public health authorities identify healthier students as better learners. The Greater Oklahoma City Chamber supports investments in community health centers specifically because employers need a healthy workforce. Oklahoma opted out of a federal summer food assistance program in 2024. Governor Stitt argued that the program would create unnecessary bureaucracy and overlap with existing efforts. Several tribal nations participated within their eligible areas instead. Advocates estimated that hundreds of thousands of Oklahoma children were left outside the summer food program's reach. Apparently, Oklahoma can find public money to subsidize corporate payroll but struggles to see the economic value of making sure children have enough to eat. A hungry third grader does not become an engineer because an aerospace company received a tax credit. An untreated illness does not disappear because the state lowered somebody else's taxes. An experienced professional does not move a family to Oklahoma simply because a politician claims the state is inexpensive. Cheap is not much of a selling point when the discount comes out of the schools, hospitals, and opportunities your family needs. Employers deciding whether to expand are also deciding whether they can attract and retain the people necessary to do the work. Oklahoma's incentive programs have supported some genuinely high-paying jobs. Pretending otherwise would miss the actual problem. The benefits have been too concentrated. The fiscal results have not always justified the cost. And the overall strategy has not produced broad enough gains for Oklahoma households. A 2025 evaluation of the 21st Century Quality Jobs Program found that approximately 97.9% of rebates went to Oklahoma County. Tulsa County accounted for approximately 1.8%. The rest of the state received almost nothing. A county-level table in the evaluation shows approximately $112.8 million in rebates associated with Oklahoma County, compared with approximately $2.1 million associated with Tulsa County. Most other Oklahoma counties received virtually none of those benefits. The same evaluation found that the program paid approximately $53.7 million in rebates between 2019 and 2024, while generating an estimated $29.4 million in state tax revenue. That produced a net fiscal cost of approximately $24.3 million. The evaluation also attributed substantial economic activity and labor income to the program, which should not be ignored. But economic activity is not the same as a positive return to the state treasury. And activity concentrated in one county is not the same as broad-based statewide prosperity. Efforts to improve oversight encountered resistance. Senate Bill 1403 originally included changes intended to strengthen Oklahoma's quality jobs requirements. The Senate passed the bill 32-15. The House substantially rewrote it and passed the amended version 51-41. The Senate never approved the final changes, and the bill did not become law. That is how an economic development strategy begins to resemble a good old boys system. Public resources flow through a politically protected network of incentives while the broader investments employers say they need remain insufficient. The evidence does not establish that every incentive recipient was a donor or that every program was designed for political contributors. But it does show a system that was far better at distributing targeted benefits than producing the educated, healthy workforce necessary to raise prosperity across Oklahoma. The ultimate economic development test is not how many incentive checks the state issued. It is whether Oklahoma households are doing better and catching up with the rest of the country. The answer, by the measures Oklahoma families actually experience, is no. According to the United States Census Bureau, Oklahoma's median household income is $65,039. The national median is $80,734. That leaves Oklahoma households $15,695 below the national median. If Oklahoma's economic development policies were delivering broad prosperity, typical households would not remain nearly $16,000 behind the rest of the country. Between 2018 and 2023, inflation-adjusted median household income increased approximately 3.2% in Oklahoma. Nationally, it increased approximately 6.4%. Oklahoma households gained ground at only half the national pace. Oklahoma's poverty rate is 14.9%, compared with 10.6% nationally. That is roughly 40% higher. The state's problem is not that it failed to subsidize business. The problem is that it did not invest adequately in the people whose skills, health, and productivity determine whether an economy grows. Some Oklahoma politicians point to Mississippi's improvements in early reading as though hiring more literacy teachers will solve the state's workforce problem. Stronger reading instruction is important. Children cannot master science, mathematics, or technical training if they cannot read. But early literacy is the beginning of an education strategy, not the entire strategy. Mississippi's 2024 fourth grade reading score was 219, compared with a national average of 214. That is meaningful improvement, and it demonstrates that serious early literacy instruction matters. By 8th grade, Mississippi's reading score was 253, compared with the national average of 257. 32% of Mississippi 4th graders scored at or above proficiency, compared with 23% of Mississippi 8th graders. Those figures do not mean early literacy programs are ineffective. They mean early progress needs sustained support throughout the rest of a student's education. Boeing is not hiring 4th graders. An aerospace engineer needs more than a promising elementary reading score. Oklahoma needs a strategy that begins before kindergarten, continues through elementary and secondary school, and connects students to college, career tech, apprenticeships, and other post-secondary opportunities. A literacy initiative without the rest of that pipeline is like building the first mile of a highway and announcing that you have solved transportation. This is where Democratic gubernatorial candidate Cindy Munson's approach directly intersects with what Boeing, business leaders, and chambers of commerce have been saying. Her workforce strategy emphasizes the education, health, and family stability necessary for Oklahoma employers to hire and grow. In an interview about workforce development, Cindy Munson said Oklahoma needs to take care of its kindergarten through 12th grade schools, but also higher education, career tech, and apprenticeship programs. That aligns directly with what employers say they need. Munson explained that businesses considering Oklahoma want to know whether local schools are strong, whether residents have access to health care, and whether workers are properly trained. That is not a different conversation from the one Boeing has been having. It is the same conversation Oklahoma's political leadership should have been having all along. Munson's published campaign priorities include increasing public school funding above the regional average, raising teacher pay, ending the existing private school voucher program, and addressing healthcare costs. These are investments in the conditions employers consider when deciding where to expand. Munson has also discussed expanding access to Oklahoma's Promise, the scholarship program that helped her become the first person in her family to graduate from college. A stronger scholarship and workforce strategy can help more Oklahoma students qualify for the jobs employers are trying to fill. A serious Oklahoma workforce strategy should start with early childhood education and strong public schools. It should continue with rigorous reading, mathematics, science, and technical instruction throughout elementary and secondary school. And it should recognize that children cannot reach their potential when basic health and nutrition needs go unmet. The strategy should make post-secondary education more accessible, not only at universities but also through community colleges, career tech, apprenticeships, and skilled trades programs. Oklahoma should connect students to career planning before they graduate and align training opportunities with the actual needs of employers. Oklahoma should recognize that affordable health care, adequate nutrition, childcare, and transportation affect whether people can learn, work, and support their families. Those investments are not unrelated social spending. They are part of a practical strategy for expanding workforce participation and improving economic opportunity. Oklahoma should measure success by whether the state produces more qualified workers, attracts better-paying jobs, and increases median household income. That is not charity. It is economic development that understands the product. To be fair, not every Republican candidate is pretending workforce concerns do not exist. Gentner Drummond's published economic platform calls for stronger workforce preparation, expanded technical training, improved rural opportunity, and less dependence on large corporate incentives. Drummond also supports health care and workforce partnerships and criticizes excessive corporate handouts. Those proposals recognize some of the same underlying problems. The question is whether Oklahoma can make the necessary investments while continuing to pursue major reductions in the revenue that supports schools, colleges, healthcare, and workforce programs. A workforce plan is only as credible as the willingness to finance it. Promising better schools while shrinking the money available to support them is not fiscal discipline. It is putting a new label on the same old contradiction. Governor Stitt has repeatedly promised to make Oklahoma a top 10 state. But a top 10 economy requires more than being inexpensive. It requires schools that prepare students to succeed, colleges and technical programs capable of producing the workers employers need, and healthcare systems that keep families healthy. A competitive Oklahoma economy requires children who are well enough fed to learn. It requires wages that give people a reason to stay. And it requires leadership willing to listen when businesses explain what would actually help them expand. Oklahoma has spent too many years treating corporate subsidies as economic development and public investment as an unnecessary expense. That approach has left the state with a shrinking engineering pipeline, lower aerospace wages than neighboring states, a median household income $15,695 below the national figure, and a poverty rate roughly 40% higher than the country overall. The tragedy is not that Oklahoma's leaders never heard what employers needed. Boeing told them, the business community told them, the chambers of commerce told them, even the state's own evaluations told them. They simply kept listening to the people asking for checks instead of the people asking for a workforce. Oklahoma's economic future cannot be built by rewarding political access while neglecting the schools, health systems, and training programs that make real opportunity possible. Oklahoma sold itself as cheap. Boeing needed it to be smart. Until Oklahoma starts investing in its people, the state will continue offering discounts on a future it never bothered to build. Follow the money at langdon.substack.com.